You know, I thought I wouldn't have to come back to FMA for a while since there wasn't anything that I really wanted to say on this series, but then I realized that the super important manga video that I posted before never got a follow-up video, and well, whatever, it's here now. Now, I haven't finished the manga, but I have read a decent chunk of it. Right now, I'm about to start the Fort Briggs arc, and it felt really slow in the anime, but it picks up pretty damn quickly in the manga. By the end of the first chapter, Sloth attacks, which makes me way more excited to get into it than I was before. But anyway, where do I even start with this? Okay, so it's important to note that I'm going to draw a lot of comparisons between the manga and Brotherhood. Maybe I'll bring up the 2003 adaptation as well, but it's gonna mostly be about Brotherhood. The biggest difference between FMA as a manga and as a show lies in its pacing. I always found Brotherhood to be poorly paced when it came to its action, which may sound weird since that's one of the things that the show was really praised for, but I always felt a sense of boredom when watching the show. Considering that, you can understand that I found it really surprising that I was enjoying every second of the manga, especially since I already knew what was going to happen. The paneling definitely helps. It makes things more exciting and faster in a way that an anime can't capture, but I don't think that that would result in such a drastic difference in the level of enjoyment that I felt. I'm pretty sure I know the reason why I like the manga so much in comparison to the anime, and it has something to do with what I said in my previous video on the manga.
I'm saying that those moments are very few in number, and most of that is due to the fact that it rushes through its early act, making characterization a problem in the long run.
Just to be clear, while reading FMA and watching Brotherhood, I tried to watch it without any prior knowledge on FMA as a series, and because of that, a lot of the characters in Brotherhood came off as really bland versions of their O3 counterparts. Because of the rushed beginning, characterization of the personalities of our main character became kind of a problem for me. But in the manga, because Ed's personality is clearly established, aside from the whole short gag, I actually found a lot more of the events in the manga to be recontextualized in a way that made them feel more important to me. That's kind of the reason why I think the manga starts getting really good after chapter 21, when the Elric brothers start delving into their past and the reason why they're on their journey. I always found the way that Brotherhood told the story to be really odd. Like, even without reading the manga and knowing the possibility that this was more accurate, it just felt wrong. Like, this is supposed to be Ed having an epiphany about the world and realizing how he as a person functions within that world and what his purpose is, and his whole mentality and understanding of alchemy is shifting as he thinks about the duality of life and death, and he comes to understand all of this by eating an ant. And it's not even trying to play this seriously. Ed eats the ant as a result of a gag where he's too hungry, so he tries to eat Al and then mistakes a line of ants for chocolate. And then once he does eat it, that's it. Like, that's all he needed to understand the philosophy and key principles of understanding something that he would go on to use for the rest of his life. They also completely cut out Mason's role in the story, which Mason's not the most important character, but he does serve a major role in Ed and Al's development and training, and he's one of the main reasons why our protagonists start to shape up and fend for themselves, and why Ed specifically starts thinking in the way his teacher wanted him to. The way this story was handled in the manga made me feel a lot more attached to our main characters. It made me feel for their journey. It's the kind of context that actually makes me kind of care for the events that are happening to the characters in the story. So the action in the story becomes more than just a flashy clash of power. It becomes something that I'm personally invested in and that I care for. There are actually a lot of minor things that Brotherhood cut out as well, which might have made the first part more bearable. It definitely would flesh out some of the plot points that are supposed to set up some pretty important stuff later on, such as the scene where Al regained his memories of the Door of Truth. In the anime, I always got confused by how Al regained his lost memories, but in the manga, there's a scene placed beforehand where Izumi is asking a doctor about how to get back memories that are lost. The doctor's response was that buried memories could potentially surface again after a huge shock, which is why having someone die inside of him would trigger this kind of response. This isn't as important, but Greed's powers are explained in much more detail in the manga as well. It's explained that regenerating and hardening takes some time, and more importantly, he can't do these two things at once, which explains the reason why Greed didn't use his ultimate shield against the Fuhrer when he gets killed. Brotherhood also cuts out the fight Ling and Lan Fan had against Envy and Gluttony, which not only cuts out a prime opportunity to make these two more likable in this version, but it's also the first time Pride is mentioned, hinting at a higher power working behind the homunculi, and the biggest cut that Brotherhood made is the Ishvalan War. Okay, so real talk, the Ishvalan War is my favorite arc in the manga so far, and I've heard about how much Brotherhood had cut out in the anime, but I was not expecting this. It's just so different, and whatever. Let's just get into it already. Firstly, let me just say, I absolutely adore the way the manga decided to start this lengthy flashback. The way that 3 different people are all giving their own perspectives on the war at the same time so that we can get the full picture of what happened is just a really smooth way to start revealing the history of something. It's one of the writing tricks that I appreciate a lot, and it's great to see that here. Going into the actual story, it's a long, bloody, dark, and twisted story that shows the corruption of the military as well as the cruelty of our villains. The way that the state alchemists brutally murder the people of Ishval, and it's not even just the fact that they're killing them, it's the way that they do it. Fucking erecting giant walls and trapping them inside to pick them off, keeping them inside concentration camps of sorts, using them as materials for the Philosopher's Stone, burning them alive. This is fucked, man. It does a good job making you feel terrible for the alchemists too. So many of them express such intense remorse over their actions and a real disgust for what they had to do. They even give some nuance to the Iron-Blood alchemists in the short time that the manga had. I was surprised to find that Gran was actually one of the more sympathetic fighters on the battlefield. He was one of the only reasons why the head priest of Ishval was able to talk with the Führer, and the scene where he takes care of some asshole spouting racist shit was a really chilling, cool moment for the guy. This whole sequence goes by way too fast in Brotherhood. All that we really see of the war is a few shots of some alchemists using their powers to kill some people, Armstrong breaking down, not even for that long, which doesn't really capture the full extent of what he was feeling after he had failed to let some Ishvalans escape their fate. And the last thing that we get in that quick montage is a kid standing in the middle of the battlefield crying. How lazy is that? Just one shot of a kid crying isn't really enough to capture the full extent of the tragedy that took place here. It's not as powerful. All we get from Brotherhood's version of things is that it was kind of sad, I guess. The Ishvalans didn't deserve that. The manga just makes this look so much more horrifying, and it's incredibly effective at evoking specific emotions from the reader. Its art is great, it's subtle, at least it's as subtle as it needs to be when dealing with a sensitive subject like the types of trauma and terrible things soldiers do when at war, racism, the horrors of killing someone. It doesn't have any over-the-top character poses or shots, it's well-paced, and by the end of it all, you just want to take a break after reading. It's something that I never really expected to happen, but I honestly really love the manga for FMA so far. I'd honestly say that in many ways it is the best way to experience FMA as a series. Definitely better than Brotherhood, and I'm excited to see what happens next. Well, that's all I have to say, and I'll be going now.